Hello and welcome to this episode of Cassiotti News. I am your host, Nick Cassiotti, and this is your only platform to break up with the traditional media and get four political parties and their opinions. Today, our first topic is the U.S. Congress was in the process of certifying electors for the next president. A massive mob of protesters descended upon the U.S. Congress building in Washington, D.C. This is a messy subject, and it's hard to make out what's going on. So, Tho, what is the takeaway from the action that we saw today, and what did it accomplish?
First of all, as Donald Trump reinforced several times throughout the day, there's no place for property damage, there's no place for violence in terms of expressing your frustration, your anger with the political system. The problem is that Washington was not prepared to seriously handle, to seriously understand, to seriously empathize with the people that showed up to the rally today. There's been nothing but dismissal by the corporate press. It's remarkable that you had as many Republicans stand up as you were expecting. But once you had people like Mitch McConnell come out against the Trump base, once you have people that do not believe this election was legitimate, once you have people organized, once you have people that have lost trust in the institutions of this country, what do you think is going to happen besides frustration? And so again, it doesn't justify what has happened today, just the same way that there's plenty of political outrage that we've seen like past year that has resulted in property damage and violence, and et cetera. Again, the way the media treats the people at today's event relative to the way that it has in past events is going to be quite different, right? Of course, that should be expected. When people do not feel that they have a legitimate voice in government, you're going to have people result in non-political solutions. And it doesn't make what happened today right, but the question is, how do you try to reconcile political norms with an angry, upset Trump base? And as far as I can tell, there's not a lot of people trying. And if you do not ask the questions, the limitations of politics, again, you're going to get things that we saw today. And again, I hope that people take seriously the concerns of the people that were there in D.C., because you cannot deal with the tens of millions of people that do not believe that Joe Biden's a legitimate president. You have to deal with that seriously. And I'm not seeing a lot of people trying to make that effort.
So, Kyle, do the libertarians take the protest today seriously, or is this something that's really going to backfire on those protesters?
This is obviously pretty serious when you have a fatality. My goodness. If anybody should be upset, it should be us libertarians who aren't represented hardly at all, because over the last 100 years, we're going in the complete opposite direction. So if anybody should be protesting, it should be me. I think this is largely a Trump propaganda. These people really believe that they're fighting for something. They think it's not a legitimate election. Lord knows, I've said this before, but we don't have a process to actually legitimize the election. It's basically, we counted it. There's no data set that you download for your state. You can't go, hey, let me check this data set. Let me make sure that the data that you're using, all of them are accounted for. I can go and find my vote. I can go online and say, hey, I'm registered. I have my social security number. I have a prefabricated global unique identifier for this record in this data set. We don't have that technology, so it's not set up to be verifiable. So I get why people are upset, because there's really no real way that you can verify that this is legitimate. And since government is just breeds corruption, it's free money. I mean, it's basically, everybody wants a piece of the pie that's being confiscated from everybody. It's going to breed corruption.
Sure. So, Austin, the Green Party has typically been the party of peace. So I think a lot of viewers out there, we're typically seeing the Republicans and Democrats on all the mainstream media. This is our audience's first opportunity to see all four major parties here. And again, for them who are maybe new to the Green Party and their idea, this is the party of peace. However, we're looking at this mob come out against what they believe in their heart is corruption. What's the Green Party take on it?
The United States has destabilized Venezuela. The United States has sanctioned Hong Kong, and the United States has armed Nazis in the Ukraine for less. $750 billion in defense, and they can't even protect the Capitol building. I'm pretty young. I was born in 1997, but I'm old enough to remember when the National Guard rolled through Minneapolis and maced people who were sitting on their porch. It was at 2 p.m. on Wednesday. What were the Trump supporters doing on a 2 p.m. on Wednesday? Don't y'all have jobs? For reference, there were 14,000 arrests at George Floyd protests, protesting racial justice. In September 2017, 180 disability activists were arrested protesting the congressional repeal of Obamacare because they were the most vulnerable and susceptible to those laws being repealed. Yet we see people storming the Capitol building for an election that had been certified through the state, and they can go to their state board of elections websites and go county by county, precinct by precinct, and look at the vote tallies. These people obviously have lost faith in the system, and we need a new electoral system in the United States. We need ranked choice voting. If you have 4 candidates, you can rank your candidates 1 through 4 on who you think is the best. So that way there's no spoiled votes. There's nobody who is throwing away their votes. There's nobody who can feel as if they don't feel represented in the system. If you think the Libertarian is the best candidate, rank Libertarian number 1. If you think the Green is the second best candidate, rank Green number 2. So if the Libertarian doesn't win, if nobody gets 50% of the vote on the first round, the second round, your vote goes to the Green. If the Green doesn't get 50%, your vote goes to the Republican, so on and so forth until somebody gets 50% of the vote. So we need a whole new electoral system in the United States to change and make sure these people have their voices heard.
Sure, and those are really great points, Rez. And looking at this mob that descended upon Washington D.C., how are Democrats going to unite us in where we're seeing such outrage?
Yeah, so let's clarify a few things here. So these people are not protesters. They're domestic terrorists. Their goal was to overthrow our democracy and put in charge their leader, Donald Trump. 100% of the responsibility for what happened today goes to Trump because he peddled this lie since his loss that the election was stolen from him. And many Republicans played along to this lie because, and I quote, "What is the downside for humoring him for this little bit of time?" Well, we've officially reached that downside. These Trump supporters brought nooses. They wore T-shirts celebrating the Holocaust and Confederate flags while storming our Capitol. They openly expressed their disdain for American democracy. And what happened today is a national disgrace. It is the culmination of appeasing a man and his base who are immune to facts. They promote an alternate perception of reality thanks to the right-wing media echo chamber. The solution is removal of Trumpism from our national politics. Donald Trump must be impeached and removed from office for inciting this violence, for inciting domestic terrorism onto our capital, and his enablers must be held accountable for their actions.
So, how do you respond? Is your party domestic terrorists?
Of course not. The problem is this: is that look, like we're not going to kowtow down here to the political party that's been doing nothing but defend people that have been tearing down statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, and act like, oh, we're the ones that are trying to corrupt American democracy. Of course, it's ridiculous. What you have right now is genuine concern that you have a potentially elected Democratic president who, again, if you want to be the serious concern here, if you want to actually look at what is undermining American democracy, the answer is right in front of us. They didn't hide it. It was the use of big tech to actively censor newsworthy controversies that cited against one candidate. What you've had in this past election cycle, you've seen the military-industrial complex, you have seen the corporate press, you have seen big tech ally themselves with a very specific purpose. That purpose being destroying Donald Trump's election chances. So I'm not going to listen here saying, oh, this is the concern. No. These people have been creating an axis of power to delegitimize. The last 4 years, we've seen nothing but attempts to delegitimize the democratically elected president, Donald Trump. You've seen people trying to, again, accusing Supreme Court justices of gang rape. You do not get to break every single political norm, every single bit of social trust for 4 years, and then try to act outraged that people think that the election that we just saw was illegitimate. Why would people trust this cycle, given what we have seen from these centers of power? Why, particularly again, the issue right now is really it's not. There's all sorts of distractions. This was the largest vote by mail campaign we've ever seen in American history. Vote by mail is notoriously infamous for being vulnerable to election fraud. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the only thing to decide what is a legitimate ballot or not is someone trying to argue signature correlation. And yet we saw multiple states, state governments choose to change election law right before the election without the approval of the legislature. None of this should have been accepted. Every single state that changed their election law in the last second of the game, those votes should have been thrown out. The problem is we do not have a judiciary that is willing to actually uphold the rule of law. No better example than the Roberts Court upholding Obamacare for political reasons. We don't have a judiciary willing to take a stand against illegitimate ballots. And as long as you have people who do not believe in the legitimacy of democracy, you're going to have people that view the imposition of what they see as an illegitimate president as an act of war. Do not be surprised when people do not engage with this in a civil manner. I'm sorry, you have to take seriously these concerns, because without taking seriously the concerns of tens of millions of Americans, you cannot have a functioning political system. Period. You can't wish those people away.
I'm going to let Rez respond, but Phil, I want to pull a little bit more out of you, right? I'm not here to take sides. I'm politically independent, right? You know, I'm an independent to begin with. I have no party affiliation, and this is not to attack you. I want more out of you. So over the past 2 months, why haven't the Republicans then, if they believe that there is fraud, right? I just want more out of you. If they believe that there is fraud, and they believe that there was all of these ballots that were fraudulently put into the system, why weren't those investigated? I mean, somebody had to print them. Somebody had to mail them. Somebody had to make them, right? So why wouldn't the political parties over the past 2 months, I understand counting the votes and the signatures and all of that. If there was a valid claim, why didn't they go after potentially the makers? And hey, why are all these additional ballots sent out or mailed out? Or was it all just done legitimately?
They've been trying to. That's been the entire You've seen multiple attempts for the Trump legal team to bring it to standing. The problem is that the court system does not want to engage with it. They want to claim standing. Meanwhile, you have had hours and upon hours of testimony from people signing affidavits, from people trying to say, "Hey, look, what we saw here was not kosher." We've had people trying to make this argument. The problem is that the court system is not seriously empowered to try to seriously engage with the possibility of fraud, because trying to adjudicate fraud after the fact, this is true. I don't care if you're talking about concerned with American elections. I don't care if you're concerned looking at banana republics. Adjudicating fraud after the fact is always very difficult. So again, what we see here is that we have a legal system where people do not believe. You have a justice system that's trying to avoid a political hot potato, and you have large sections of the American population. And if you're looking at 80% of Trump voters, as many polls have shown, 80% of Trump voters that do not believe the election was legitimate, and Trump has 70+ million votes, the most votes of any Republican candidate in the history of the United States, that means that you have majorities of multiple states that do not believe that Joe Biden's a legitimate president. It's fine to say that these people are crazy. I understand not empathizing with them, but empathizing with them is not particularly important for dealing with the political ramifications here.
Sure.
And so the question is, what are those in power prepared to do to try to make it appear that they at least want to try to engage with a large part of the American population that believes the government's legitimate? And the answer was given by Ted Cruz for an election commission. The people in charge right now do not have a sense of understanding the environment to see that, hey, look, having a commission trying to pretend like you care is probably on the good side. Washington, D.C. is run for arrogant, mediocre people, and this is the consequences of it, is what we saw today.
Kyle, I mean, we see very passionate discussion here from Phil. I mean, he is bringing up very passionate points that he believes that the election was stolen. That's what has triggered this mob to come to Washington, D.C. Kyle, as a libertarian, do you agree that triggered people should protest?
Everybody has a right to protest. They don't have a right to march on, certain property and vandalize things. Of course not. So, yeah, you can protest. This is not the way to do it. This incited violence. Like I said, there was one person who didn't make it out of there, and that's unacceptable. So, unfortunately, you run out of options. You are at this point, the Republicans have run out of options, and their last option is to get violent, and that's a bad option. That's not an option you want to see exercised. Like, violence is only going to cause problems in the future for the Republicans.
I mean, if we're looking at a center person, if we're looking at the average individual, myself or anybody else, a lot of people were disgusted by the mob. A lot of people were disgusted by the first debate where we couldn't hear what both of the political candidates were talking about. I mean, if somebody's disgusted and potentially they're disgusted by packing in votes that the Democrats are accused of, will this allow the next election cycle, whether it's 2 years or in 4 years, for the Libertarians or the Green Party to gain votes, to actually gain seats, to actually put a foothold to a disgusted America?
I don't know. How about the idea that we just get money out of Washington so everybody can win? If I go to the market, I can buy a blue shirt or a red shirt or a yellow shirt. We all get what we want when we go out in the market. When people start to lose is when we start rendering services through government, because one person is going to get what they want and everyone else is going to lose. That's the only real way the Libertarians, because at the end of the day, the Libertarians want to strip down power of government. Give that money back to the Republicans. Give that money back to the Democrats. We want you to have your money so you can get with your Democratic friends and your Republican friends and try to exercise through volunteerism instead of coercion the things that you want out of life.
Austin, so if we're looking at two fools going at each other right now, these Republicans marching on each other, these Democrats potentially with their fraud, I mean, does this really open up the door? Does this shine the light on the need for a third party?
There's an absolute need for a third party in the United States. A fourth party, a fifth party, a sixth party. There's no reason why we should be limited to two. The United States is not a democracy. The United States is a two-party dictatorship. The United States is a third world country in a Gucci belt. We've seen far too often in the United States, Arizona, Ohio, libertarian parties, green parties being banned in those states. The Green Party in Ohio was banned in 2018. There is no option for people who legitimately have grievances with the system.
So has this election cycle really shown the light of that to the American people? Has this, from the beginning of the debates to the election to the supposed fraud, does that shine a light now to this mob? I mean, the main topic is this mob right now in Washington, D.C. Do you see this over the next 48 hours calming down?
No. Because of our electoral system and because of the political system we have been coerced into by the two-party dictatorship, I don't really see anything changing in the future, especially with the Tea Party movement being absorbed by the Republicans and then pushing the Republican Party farther right, with the Black Lives Matter, the labor protest, the women's rights feminist movement, the LGBTQ rights movements being absorbed by the Democratic Party and failing, doing nothing, being squashed by the bourgeoisie liberal establishment in the Democratic Party, who would rather choose to keep the status quo than to help those minority communities who are dying under the current capitalist system, being poisoned to death by environmental toxicity. They'd rather see a promotion of profit than they would see real change. So I don't see the Republicans budging, if not the Republicans moving even farther right to coax this new generation, this new right, as we might call it.
So, Rez, to that point, we're looking at these riots right now, and the media is very focused on that, right? So you have every major news network focused on broadcasting the Republicans in Washington, D.C. right now. Is that the message that they should be sending out right now? I mean, do you think that that's going to incite additional violence in other cities? I mean, how do we know that something like this isn't going to happen in other towns and other cities? How do we move forward from this?
Well, look, I mean, we have to ask ourselves this. Why are a group of domestic terrorists assaulting the Capitol? It's because you've got one person named Donald Trump who has actively lied to the American public about these recent election results. My friend Bill brought up all these points, but as I mentioned earlier, you've got a base that are simply immune to facts. The courts threw away all those cases by the Trump legal team because they're not based on facts. they're based on propaganda. It's no wonder they've lost over 60 times at courts. And these are judges that have been appointed by both parties. There's a reason why even the Supreme Court that's packed with Trump appointees threw this case out. Because when you bring a case to the Supreme Court or to any court in America, it has to be grounded on facts. Trump lawyers can't even, under oath that they took with the bar, they can't even make the same claims that they make out in public inside the court, because they know that if they lie, they'll have their bar license revoked. And that's where that's what we're dealing with today. We've got a soon-to-be ex-president who has lied to the American public, who's riled people up, made these ridiculous claims that the election was stolen from him.
Well, I want to.
No. Let me finish. Let me finish, Nick. Let me finish, Nick, and then you can ask. Okay. But that's what happened. He bullied the Georgia Secretary of State to find him votes. That's what we're dealing with, and that's why you have members of his own party that are rebuking what has happened. These domestic terrorists showed up because they've been incited. They've been incited by President Trump, and anyone still defending what went on today need a reality check.
Sure, I appreciate that. And like I said, I'm not taking sides, nor am I against you. Like I just said with Phil, right? I want to get a little bit more out of you so that the audience can get some meat and potatoes, right? So looking at the entire objective of what had happened here, right? So from the ballots being stuffed and from the people in, like you said, in the bar.
But there was no ballot stuffed. Nick, when you ask me questions, it has to be grounded on facts. There's no ballots being stuffed. That's the thing. If there was, they would be able to prove it in the court. But they've lost over 60 times. There is no ballot stuffed. Okay, there's no potential voter fraud. There was no voter fraud, because if there was, they would be able to prove it in court. But they haven't been able to. They've been given several chances, but they haven't been able to do so. The Trump team has lied to the American people. The soon-to-be ex-president has lied to the American people.
So to what Tho had said, I want to bring up his point prior, right? So you brought up people from the bar can lose their license, they can go to jail for that. Well, he brought up the point that sworn affidavits, I mean, people don't have an incentive to lie under oath and can go to jail. Average people, you, me, other people who had observed these potential ballot stuffings, they have said under oath they can go to jail for that. I mean, they're putting their own necks on the line, and there's over 200 in Pennsylvania alone, over 200, right? So I'm not saying that one way or another is right or wrong. I'm just saying that if you're going to say that the people in the bar can have their licenses pulled, average citizens can go to jail because they've sworn affidavits. Is that wrong?
Yes, and anyone can make a sworn affidavit, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to prove the claims in court. And thus far, they haven't been able to prove their claims in court. President Trump has every right to make legal challenges, and he has exercised that right. And he has lost over 60 times in front of judges that has been democratically appointed and Republican appointed. He had his case thrown out by the Supreme Court. The election is over. It's done. Joe Biden is going to be our next president. What Donald Trump did today by inciting the violence, by inciting the domestic terrorism, is wrong. It is disgusting. It's a shameful day in America.
Because I mean, for those that want all the intellectual depth of a CNN pundit, I appreciate Rez, providing the talking point narratives. The problem is this: don't talk to me about. Obviously, Rez is the national research on these legal cases, because the Supreme Court didn't throw out the case of, the Texas case because of a lack of evidence. They did it because of lack of standing, as I addressed earlier. It's not about a lack of evidence. It's because you have courts that are abandoning trying to engage with this issue at all. So again, if you want to try to dance around the issue, I get it. I understand. Again, Rez is providing you all the intellectual depth of a CNN pundit. I assume by stumbling on a channel like this, you're looking for some alternative views. Well, this is what we have to offer. Again, there's been nothing to do. Look at the historical results of vote by mail ballots. Look at the acceptance rates historically. Look at the way that they are this election. What you saw, everyone knew going into this election that vote by mail ballots are a uniquely vulnerable part of the election process. Everyone knew this. New York Times, 2012 article. You can look it up. Okay. Every place knew that vote by mail increase made the election more vulnerable. Did states respond by getting more serious about election fraud? They did not. No. Instead, they made last-second changes to legislation. This is black and white facts. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't rewrite the history. And again, the idea that, oh, well, it's whatever the courts can decide, these are the facts. I'm sorry, I don't think that OJ is innocent. I don't think that the courts can handle every single case that comes before them. Standing as a unique issue is not that of the facts. Again, Rez can rail all he wants. The fact is this: we have multiple states, again, that do not believe this election is illegitimate. Simply telling them they're wrong is not a solution. And so the question is, how do people like Rez plan for Joe Biden to govern for 4 years if they cannot seriously engage with a large section of the public? And he has no answer to this. He hasn't thought it out. Joe Biden hasn't thought it out. All these people that have utilized all their levers of power to dismiss Red America, they don't have the answers either. And this goes a lot more than simply superficial saying, oh, well, the courts ruled. These are much bigger issues, and taking them not seriously is not going to end well. Period.
Rez,
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna let you respond.
Hold on, no, I got to respond
but
to
I
that,
also
Nick.
want to get Austin and Kyle in here as well, right? Because the audience deserves a well-rounded conversation, right? And I think that the audience does deserve to hear two other parties. But yeah, go ahead, Rez, 2 minutes.
Okay, look, for there to be standing in court, it has to be based on facts. And these cases aren't based on facts. You can cite, though, my friend Though can cite the 2012 New York Times article, but again, there has been no voter fraud with the mail-in ballots that we've had in this past election. So he can point out over and over again, like, oh, you have all this sect of the population that doesn't believe Joe Biden is president. Well, why is that? Because you have a current president that has actively lied to the American public.
Austin, we're looking at two parties going back and forth. We're looking at tensions rise to the point where we've got this mob, right? We have this massive blemish on America right now. Is this the chance for Americans to look at you, to look at the Green Party and say, you know what? I don't want to be like those two anymore.
The Greens are a valid alternative, as well as the Libertarians, because as you can see, the Democrat and Republican are sitting here screaming at each other, and the Greens and the Libertarians here were just either not listening, taking our headphones out, being tired of the constant drivel, or just laughing at them together. But yeah, the United States is not a democracy when you have a country built on the enslavement of one race, the complete banning of another race, and the genocide of another. You have a current system where people don't feel represented. You know, when the United States was founded in the original Constitution, I couldn't vote. I'm not a land-owning I'm a white male, but I'm not land-owning. So the system was not built for people. You know, Black people weren't considered people. Asian people were not allowed to enter the country. So we need a new system and a new politic in this country. And I believe the Greens and the Libertarians are offering that. The Greens with our system of a whole new economic system built around real wealth, our whole new economic system built around the environment, and that we are living on a planet with a dwindling amount of carbon resources. Libertarians with their limited government and their views on absolute personal freedom. I do believe we have alternatives that people are out there looking for. And I do believe that we can help to change the political system for the better and help people feel more represented so they're not out here using violence to have their voices heard, because a riot is the voice of the unheard.
Kyle, I'm going to give you the last word on this, but as we know, change is slow. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat coming into power, massive changes don't happen one way or another. If a libertarian, or if somebody's looking for a libertarian or looking for an out or a third party, change is slow. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that's good. That's good news and bad news, because that means the bad news is good policy can't change a country overnight, but that means bad policy can't destroy a country overnight. So, you know, we've ridden off of freedom. I've said that before. For the last, since 1913, we're very, very free. We had, federal government spending was like 3% of GDP at one point, and that has ballooned out of control over the last 100 years. It's gotten so enormous, and of course we have this corruption and this infighting because everybody wants a piece of the pie, and in my opinion, the only way we're going to settle this is that everybody can get more of what they want if they just keep their own resources. Republicans can get more of what they want. Democrats can get more of what they want. And when you funnel money through government, you're just getting massive waste anyway. You're getting massive waste. You're getting massive corruption. You have the money printing that's going on. You have, I mean, if you want to look at a crook, look at Congress. I mean, they are. We are in major deficits. They're not fiscally responsible. We are in for a storm if we don't get our act together.
I appreciate that. Thank you to all of our guests to come on, and we appreciate you as a viewer looking at more than two sides of the story, looking at more than just what the media is giving to you. So we appreciate you coming on and joining us today. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button, give us a like and a thumbs up, share this with your friends, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.